My name is Lila Marie Thompson, though I was Lila Marie Carter before I married Mark 6 years ago. I'm 34, a mother to our 4-year-old daughter, Sophie, and a wife who spent the better part of a decade trying to be what everyone expects. We live in a tidy suburban house in Oakwood, a quiet town where the streets are lined with maples and the neighbors wave but don't pry. From the outside, our life looks perfect. Mark's a financial advisor with a corner office, I manage the home and volunteer at Sophie's preschool, and our daughter is a bright, giggling whirlwind who keeps us grounded. But perfection is a fragile thing, and lately, I've felt it cracking beneath the surface. I wasn't always this way, restless, uncertain, like a stranger in my own skin. Growing up in a small apartment in Cleveland with my single mom, I dreamed of being an artist, my sketchbooks filled with charcoal drawings of cityscapes and faces. I studied art history in college, imagining a life curating galleries or teaching. But then I met Mark, with his steady gaze and quiet confidence, and my plans shifted. He was older, 30 to my 24, and he offered a stability I'd never known. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation, trading my dreams for a life that felt safe, predictable. I don't regret it, not exactly. Sophie's laughter, her tiny hand in mine, is worth every sacrifice. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder who I might have been if I'd chosen differently. For the past year, I've been struggling with what my doctor calls chronic tension. It's a vague term, but it fits the constant tightness in my shoulders, the headaches that bloom behind my eyes, the way my jaw clenches when I'm trying to keep everything together. It started after Sophie's 3rd birthday, when Mark's work hours grew longer and I took on more at home. Cooking, cleaning, ferrying Sophie to dance classes, all while fielding his late-night calls about client dinners. I didn't complain. Mark was building our future, and I was his partner, his support. But the weight of it all settled into my bones, a quiet ache that never left. Mark noticed, though not in the way I hoped. He didn't ask how I was feeling or suggest I take a break. Instead, he decided I needed fixing. "You're so tense all the time, Lila," he said one evening, his voice carrying that familiar mix of concern and command. We were in the kitchen, me washing dishes, him scrolling through his phone. "You need to relax. A massage would do you good." I froze, the soapy sponge still in my hand. The idea of a massage made my skin crawl, not because I didn't want relief, but because it felt too intimate, too vulnerable. "I don't know, Mark," I said, keeping my voice light. "I'm not really comfortable with that. A stranger touching me, it's not my thing." He laughed, a short, dismissive sound that made my stomach twist. "You're overthinking it. It's professional. They're trained. It's not like some random guy's gonna get handsy." He looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You can't keep going like this, Lila. You're a mess. It's affecting Sophie, you know." That stung. Sophie was my world, and the idea that my stress was hurting her cut deeper than anything. I wanted to argue, to tell him I'd manage, that I didn't need a massage to fix what was wrong. But Mark had a way of making his suggestions feel like obligations, his certainty a wall I couldn't scale. He'd always been decisive, guiding me through choices with a confidence I envied. In the early days, I loved it, his steady hand, his vision of our life together. But now, it felt like a leash, tightening when I dared to pull away. "I'll think about it," I said, turning back to the dishes. "No thinking," he said, his tone final. "I already booked you a spot at Serenity Haven. Saturday, 3 p.m. It's the best place in town. You'll thank me later." I didn't respond. The water in the sink was cold now, my hands pruned from scrubbing. He'd booked it without asking, without even pretending to care how I felt. I wanted to tell him how small that made me feel, how his insistence erased my voice. But the words stayed trapped, tangled in the years of habit, the unspoken agreement that I'd trust him, that I'd be the wife he needed. So I nodded, forcing a smile. "Okay," I whispered. "If you think it's best." The week leading up to the appointment was a blur of routine, packing Sophie's lunches, folding laundry, smiling through preschool drop-offs. But beneath it all, a quiet dread grew. I tried to talk to my friend Claire about it over coffee, hoping she'd understand. "Mark's making me go to this massage," I said, stirring my latte. "I don't want to, but he thinks it'll fix me." Claire frowned, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "That's kind of pushy, Lila. Why's he so set on it?" I shrugged, avoiding her eyes. "He says I'm too tense. That it's affecting Sophie." Saying it out loud made my chest tighten. Was I failing as a mother? Was my stress really that obvious? "You're not failing anyone," Claire said, reading my thoughts. "But if you don't want to go, tell him. It's your body." I nodded, but I knew I wouldn't. Telling Mark no felt like defying gravity, possible in theory, but not in my world. So I kept quiet, letting the dread fester until Saturday arrived. Serenity Haven was tucked into a quiet corner of Oakwood, its glass facade reflecting the late afternoon sun. The lobby was sleek and serene, with soft lighting and the heavy scent of eucalyptus and lavender. A faint hum of instrumental music wove through the air, and I clutched my purse as I approached the receptionist, a young woman with a polished smile. "Lila Thompson?" she asked, handing me a clipboard. "Just fill this out." I scribbled my details, name, medical history, preferences, my hand trembling slightly. I told myself it was silly to be nervous. This was normal. People did this all the time. Mark was right. I was making it a bigger deal than it was. "Lila?" A man's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up to see him, Ethan, my massage therapist. He was tall, with dark hair swept back and eyes that seemed to see right through me. His smile was warm, disarming, and I felt a flicker of relief mixed with something else, something I couldn't name. "Hi," I said, standing to follow him down a hallway lined with frosted glass doors. He wore a fitted white shirt and black pants, his movements smooth, confident. There was an ease to him, a charm that made me feel both comforted and exposed. "First time getting a massage?" he asked as we entered a small, dimly lit room. A massage table sat in the center, draped in crisp white linens. Candles flickered on a shelf, casting soft shadows on the walls. The air was warm, thick with the scent of essential oils. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed, clutching my purse tighter. "A little," he said, his tone gentle, almost teasing. "But don't worry. I'll take good care of you. We'll go at your pace, and you just let me know what you're comfortable with, okay?" His words were reassuring, and I nodded, my shoulders loosening slightly. He explained the process. I'd undress to my comfort level, lie under the sheet, and he'd step out to give me privacy. It sounded so routine, so professional, that I felt foolish for my earlier resistance. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I did need this. When Ethan left the room, I hesitated, then stripped down to my underwear, folding my clothes neatly on a chair. The sheet was cool against my skin as I slid onto the table, pulling it up to my shoulders. I lay face down, my cheek pressed against the padded headrest, and focused on my breathing. In, out. This was fine. I was fine. Ethan knocked softly before re-entering. "Ready?" he asked, and I mumbled a yes. The lights dimmed further, and I heard the faint clink of a bottle, then the sound of his hands rubbing together, warming the oil. The first touch was gentle, his fingers pressing into the base of my neck. I tensed instinctively, my body bracing for something I couldn't name. But his hands were steady, kneading the knots with a skill that surprised me. "You're carrying a lot of tension here," he said, his voice low, almost a murmur. "Just breathe into it." I exhaled slowly, and his hands moved in rhythmic circles, working down my shoulders, then along my spine. The pressure was perfect, not too hard, not too soft, and I felt my body begin to soften, the tightness I'd carried for months starting to unravel. The room was warm, the music a soft hum, and I let myself drift, my mind quiet for the first time in ages. Time blurred as Ethan worked. His hands glided over my back, my arms, my legs, always professional, keeping the sheet in place. He checked in occasionally, "Is this okay?" And I answered in monosyllables, too relaxed to form full sentences. The candles flickered, their light dancing on the walls, and I felt something I hadn't in years, cared for. Not in the way Mark cared, with his plans and expectations, but in a way that felt simple, unburdened. But then, something shifted. It was subtle at first, so slight I almost didn't notice. His hands lingered a moment too long on the curve of my lower back, his fingers brushing the edge of the sheet. My eyes fluttered open, a prickle of awareness cutting through the haze. I told myself it was nothing, just part of the massage. But when his hands moved to my hips, his touch felt different, slower, more deliberate, almost like a caress. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost intimate. My heart thudded, a mix of confusion and something else, something I didn't want to name. I should have said no. I should have sat up, pulled the sheet tighter, and told him to stop. But I didn't. I stayed silent, my body betraying me as it responded to the warmth of his hands. The knot in my stomach loosened, replaced by a heat I hadn't felt in years. His fingers traced the line of my hip, then dipped lower, grazing the sensitive skin just above my thigh. The sheet shifted slightly, exposing more of me than it should have. I felt a flush of warmth, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't right. This wasn't what I'd come for. But the part of me that should have protested was drowned out by a deeper, hungrier part, one that had been neglected for too long. "Lila," he said, my name a whisper, and I felt his breath against my shoulder. "Tell me if you want me to stop." I didn't tell him to stop. I didn't say anything. My silence was an answer, and he took it as permission. His hands grew bolder, exploring places they had no business being. The line between professional and personal dissolved, and I let it. The massage table became a space where rules didn't exist, where the woman I'd been, Lila, the dutiful wife, the devoted mother, faded into someone else, someone who wanted, who felt, who chose. I don't know how long it lasted. Minutes, maybe, or an eternity. When it was over, Ethan stepped back, his demeanor shifting back to professional as if nothing had happened. "Take your time getting up," he said, his voice neutral. "I'll be outside." I lay there, the sheet tangled around me, my body humming with a mix of guilt and exhilaration. What had I done? I'd come here because Mark insisted, because I wanted to be the wife who listened, who trusted. And now, I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. My skin still tingled where Ethan had touched me, and I hated how much I didn't hate it. I hated how alive I felt, how my body had woken up in a way it hadn't in years. I dressed in a daze, avoiding my reflection in the small mirror by the door. My hands shook as I pulled on my jeans, my blouse, my shoes. When I stepped into the hallway, Ethan was waiting, leaning against the wall with an unreadable expression. "Hope you feel relaxed," he said, handing me a glass of water. His tone was casual, but his eyes held a flicker of something, knowing, maybe, or daring me to acknowledge what had happened. "Thanks," I mumbled, unable to meet his gaze. I hurried to the reception desk, my face burning as I paid. The receptionist smiled as if everything was normal, and I wondered if she could see the truth written on my skin. Did I look different? Did I carry the weight of my secret in the way I moved, the way I avoided her eyes? The drive home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, the city lights smearing past like watercolor. I kept replaying every moment, the way Ethan's hands had felt, the way I'd let it happen, the way I'd wanted it. I wanted to blame Mark, to tell myself his insistence had pushed me into this, that he'd cornered me into a situation I wasn't ready for. But I knew better. I'd made a choice, even if it was a silent one. I'd chosen to stay silent, to let the moment unfold, to let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. I stopped at a park halfway home, pulling into an empty lot. The air was cool, the sky a deep indigo. I sat on a bench, my hands clasped tightly, and let the weight of it all settle over me. What had I done? I was a wife, a mother. I loved Sophie with every fiber of my being, and I loved Mark, even if it was a tired, complicated love. But in that room, with Ethan's hands on me, I'd felt something else, something selfish, something alive. And I didn't know how to reconcile the two. I thought about the early days with Mark, when love was easy. We'd met at a coffee shop, me sketching in a corner, him spilling his latte and laughing as he apologized. He'd been charming, attentive, his steadiness a balm to my restless heart. I remembered our first date, a picnic by the lake, his hand brushing mine as we shared a slice of pie. Back then, his decisiveness felt like strength, not control. When had it changed? When had I stopped feeling seen? When I walked into the house, Mark was on the couch, his phone in hand, the TV droning in the background. Sophie was asleep upstairs, her bedtime routine handled by the babysitter. "Hey," Mark said, glancing up. "How was it? Feel better?" I forced a smile, my throat tight. "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "It was relaxing." "Good." He nodded, already turning back to his screen. "Told you it'd be worth it." I stood there, waiting for him to look at me, to see the truth I was sure was etched into my face. But he didn't. He never did. His eyes stayed on his phone, his attention elsewhere, and I felt a pang of something, anger, maybe, or grief. I'd betrayed him, but he hadn't even noticed. He hadn't noticed me in years, not really. Not the way Ethan had, in that fleeting, forbidden moment. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my steps heavy. In the bathroom, I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes bright with something I didn't recognize. I looked alive, and it terrified me. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the feeling, but it lingered, a quiet fire in my veins. That night, I lay beside Mark, his breathing steady as he slept. I stared at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying in my mind. I thought about Ethan, about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd said my name. I thought about Mark, about the years of silences, the way his love had become a checklist of tasks and expectations. I thought about Sophie, her innocent trust, and the weight of being her mother, her anchor. I didn't know what would happen next. Would I go back to Serenity Haven? Would I see Ethan again, let that fire burn brighter? Or would I bury this secret, carry it like a stone in my chest, and go on being the wife Mark expected? I didn't have answers. All I knew was that something had shifted inside me, a crack in the foundation of who I thought I was. And as I lay there, the darkness pressing in, I wasn't sure I wanted to seal it shut. The next morning, I woke early, the house still quiet. Sophie was curled up in her bed, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly. I watched her sleep, my heart aching with love and guilt. Downstairs, I made coffee, moving through the motions of normalcy. But when I opened my purse to grab my phone, I found a small card tucked inside, Serenity Haven's logo, with Ethan's name and a handwritten note, "If you need to talk." I stared at it, my pulse quickening. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. I slipped it into my pocket, a secret I wasn't ready to let go of. And as I poured my coffee, the fire in my veins flickered, waiting for a spark.